No, if I remember correctly, there was another stop in for you at another restaurant that has a really renowned history in the world of wine. Did you work at Crew for a while?
I did. I worked at Crew after Atlanta.
After Atlanta.
I worked after I left Atlanta in 2000. In beginning of 2006, I came up to New York. My family's close by. I wanted to be back in New York. I really love this city, and I worked at Per Se, Thomas Keller.
That's
for
right. You worked
2.5 years, and then I had
another somewhat famous chef.
I had a brief period after that. Where I had a small company importing wines into Asia. A rocky road there. Difficult to do business in Asia,
yeah,
and it was actually towards the end of my time doing trying my hand at that business that I ended up working at Crew. I was fairly good friends with the people who owned Crew and who ran Crew in the wine program there, mostly because, I mean, this has been one of the greatest wine lists I've ever seen in my life. I keep a PDF of the wine lists on my desktop just to pour through every once in a while, just to like remind myself about cuvee names or vintages, even prices sometimes.
Just the thing, the whole thing was really...
Well, I started going there because I love wine, and it was a great chance to taste a lot of interesting things, extremely well priced. But what I ended up focusing in on was their immense German collection. I love German wine, and their prices were great, and they had mature wine. And so I became known as the guy who would come into the bar and never eat anything, but would cherry pick his way through $150 bottles of German wine that should have been $450. And then eventually they needed a sommelier.
That seems like a German wine label, quite long of a nickname.
Absolutely. I put my hat in the ring. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm sure they had a short version that once again...
Maybe also known as Raj.
Right, or that sleeping guy.
Yeah, right.
That was a great experience for me. Crew, one of the greatest wine restaurants,
amazing.
and really a wine-centric restaurant, which was unusual. I mean, outside of Montrachet,
Veritas.
Veritas eventually, and then now we have RN74 out on the West Coast.
Oh, certainly.
There really aren't that many.
There aren't that many.
It's true.
It's a tough road to hoe, I think.
For sure, and it was tough for them as well. I mean, it was a restaurant really built around a certain clientele that once they went away, so did the restaurant.
Well, it's kind of like what happened at Ryland Inn in a way. I mean,
in a big way,
September 11th happened with that in 2001, but then later, there was another recession too. So.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's
it's a tough business, that's for sure. I'm glad to be at a very strong house. Well, while I was working for Gunter's when I first met Danielle, actually.
Oh, okay.
And I had met him before. I'd met him coming into dinner, and he came to my table. I'm sure he wouldn't have remembered me, though. Some long-haired guy who was working in the kitchen at the Ryland Inn or something. But I was so impressed with him, and I liked him so much.
One of the most charismatic people I've ever met.
Incredible. And you can tell his passion.
Yeah, comes through in every
he's like a vibrating piece of energy. He's immense, and so I just love that. I love everything about it. And so eventually I got wind that there might be a position here, and I started asking for it, and I got very lucky and was supported by friends and family in the business, and sent me into here to really one of the great wine programs in the country, and for me, truly the best wine job in New York City. And the reason for that is because there's not many restaurants that have remained with a great clientele who support the restaurant, who are loyal to the restaurant, and also have the means to do so.
Right.
And that have a stage set with the kind of food that really goes with great wine, and given the opportunity with a great budget because again of our customer base and a huge cellar. The cellar downstairs, which you know very well, having worked there, and you've been to my apartment in the West Village as well. I think it's probably safe to say like 6-7 times the size of my apartment.
Easily bigger than your apartment, yeah, by a good margin.
I'm bad with square feet, but I'm gonna go with 6.
I'm no realtor, but I think you could probably fit your apartment almost in the office of the cellar.
Most of it, including the bins. That's true.
With the bins.
Well, I mean, just having space and the ability to work
physical
with wine. Physical space is so important, and in New York City, it's incredible.
Properly refrigerated.
I've done some consulting work here and there for other restaurants. I remember when I worked worked for this restaurant in the West Village, where the cellar was around the corner, down the street, across 7th Avenue, in a parking garage. Yeah. So you had to take this cart and walk down 10th Street, in the bicycle lane, lots of dirty looks, and kind of managed to get it down into past all the rats running around in the car park to the one refrigerated room in the back. Here, it's like in the Ritz, you know.
In my last job, we had to send like a Sherpa guide out for the wine. I mean, it was like way down.
Yeah.
And as soon as we explained to the guy what the job would be, he was like, "No way!" And then we like convinced him, but it was just an immense amount of space. It was like a football field of space you had to cover every time you got a bottle of wine. Well, speaking of that, so you have, I assume, a lot of help.
I do. I've got both an immense and immensely talented staff. I've got 2 full-time assistant sommeliers. Edouard Bourgeois, who's a young gentleman from Champagne region in France, Champagne and Burgundy.
They make a little wine there.
They make a little wine there. He knows a lot about it. He's very, very talented and very, very capable. He's actually, it's funny, I'm the only member of the wine team here who isn't a musician, so he's a pianist and very talented at that, and a bit of a singer. He likes show tunes. Jesse
but he's
McCollum.
Straight, though. He's straight. For the folks at home.
He's French, but he's straight. Jesse McCollum, a young American gentleman who also very talented.
Really nice,
he plays guitar and also does wine. And he's got a great resume of New York restaurants. Really understands the clientele here, the scene. And
so important to get who it is you're talking to.
Exactly, in a big way, especially in a setting like this, because while we do have a lot of tourists here, we're a neighborhood restaurant for New Yorkers.
For some of the wealthiest people in the country.
Indeed. I have another young gentleman who works part-time with me, and I'm very lucky to have him as well, Caleb Ganzer. And he's worked in several of the restaurants in the Daniel Group here in New York. He worked at DBGB, and he also worked at Café Baloo, and now he works with us. He also contributes a great deal to the spirits program here, especially the cocktails. A very creative young guy, and he also works as a server. So there's 4 of us all together.
Do you find that that's a real asset, being able to bring up people through the restaurants?
Absolutely.
Like recognizing talent fairly early on and being like, you know
so
what, you're doing a great job at here. Why don't we give you a bigger venue, more prestigious?
And you know about this very well because you used to work as a sommelier here, and you were given the opportunity at another restaurant. And didn't you come from?
Yeah, I fought my way up the ranks.
Up 95. I think it's immensely important. Right now, the sommelier at Café Baloo used to work here. He got to be comfortable with the group, understand our clientele, and then we were able to give him that opportunity. Every time that happens, and it's happened a few times since I've been here, it's bittersweet because I covet.
You have that right-hand guy.
I love them, but at the same time, to be able to give them that opportunity and see them grow, that happened to me with several people in the business. You know, Craig Shelton amongst them, Gunter, definitely in a big way. It has been a huge help.
You're saying they invested in you?
They invested in me, and they built me up, and they gave me the opportunity to go out into the world and create something great.
And you've done great.
I've been very lucky, as I said.
I think you've returned that promise in a way.
Indeed. And I hope that I've trained a few people. I certainly try and mentor wine enthusiastic people. I always look for people who really have the passion.
Right.
A lot of people want to become superstars and not do any work, and that's
talking about me. No, I'm just kidding. So, but no, I mean that's a good question. So when you sit down at the interview, what are you looking? I mean, a lot of people maybe watching this would wonder, what's it like to work at Daniel? What do they ask? I'm a young guy. I want to work at a great restaurant. It's a goal of mine. What are you looking for when you?
I'm looking for passion. I'm looking for the desire to really know more all the time.
Right.
Nothing bothers me more than a young sommelier who's perfectly content with whatever knowledge they have about what's on the list.
Right.
If they're not coming to me and asking me why we don't have this, why I tasted this, can we have this on the list, it's boring for me because then they leave me to my chances, and the next thing you know, there'll only be Chablis on the list.
Right.
And like
right. Yeah.
Obviously that's not the case, but that is a danger, and
complacency
is different, and also I have a difficulty being out there and tasting a lot of wines and getting exposed to a lot of wines. I rely on friends co-workers to develop my palate and my interest and my focus, and I need that, and I especially like that, to have that out of the staff of the restaurant.
But in a way you also need to sort of like reach every guest, but it's impossible for one guy to do it.
Well, for sure.
You want that passion to come through for them.
The other thing I want is a certain ability with customers and the ability to converse, the ability to be charming, to make people feel at home, because again, this is a dining experience. It's not a lecture. Nothing's worse for me than the guy who wants to stand at the table and recite all of the nuances of the different characteristics of every cru of Beaujolais. Most people don't care about that. What they want to know is what wine is great for their experience. Why is it great for their experience? why should I believe you?
Right.
You know, you want somebody who's charming and
that's
capable.
so they come to make your day.
Exactly. And we split up the dining room by station, but we're constantly trading off on tables. This guy's Edward. I need you to go talk to this guy. You know, he needs to be charmed by a guy with an accent.
Who's a pianist?
Yeah, with an accent who's a pianist. Or you know, Jesse, go talk to these young chicks. They need a little attention.
Jesse's the closer, I see.
Well, maybe all of us are. It's hard to say. So all of those talents are important, and of course the ability to push. It's a very busy dining room. It's a very intense dining room. The standards of service here are very high. You know, in many restaurants, wine-centric restaurants, the aspects of service that sommeliers need to know are very low. Here they're very, very high. So a lot of that kind of training is important.
Yeah, I remember, you know, being handed the knife for carving up a goose and being like, well, I'm a sommelier. And they'd be like, well, here's your knife, because you can carve that goose just like everybody else. So, you know, we talked a little bit about who it is that's serving the wines. Let's talk a little bit about those wines.
Okay.
I know that you've set aside a few things for us that are kind of emblematic of what you're up to.
You know, you asked me, you said 3 wines. That's like the hardest thing to ask a sommelier to do, or anybody who loves wine. Go pick 3 wines. I mean, it's like the notion of the desert island. You know?
Absolutely.
I'm like, okay, I will take 5,000 bottles of.
Well, I said it to you with a parched voice. I was like, bring me 3. What do you got? What do you got for us?
Okay. Well, I'm a big lover of these 3 regions. So, although I am granted grabbed at random, so this is sort of my disclaimer.
These are the closest to the
I love these wines.
doors,
Only one of them is. A wine that I actually still have some in my cellar, and I covet it, and I love it, and I only open them on special occasions. The other 2, I wish I had more, and I think that they're all brilliant and great wines, but they were close at hand. Let's see. We'll start with the least French, because it's the coolest label.
It is amazing. One of the great labels.
We'll get a close-up of this later. At the Ryland Inn, I first learned how to read a German wine label with this wine. It was a cabinet. This is an Auslese, a bit of a richer style, although really not that much sweeter given the estate and their style. So this is an estate, an ancient estate, in fact, called Maximum Grünhäuser, which is a lot of fun to say. The name of the proprietor's family is von Schubert, and it's in the Ruhr Valley, and it's an incredible vineyard. The vineyard site is Absberg. Maximum Grünhäuser itself is the entirety of a vineyard, but there's 3 parcels in it, Bruderberg, Absberg, and Herrenberg, and they're all brilliant, and they all have their own characteristics. Absberg very often speaks to me the most, because it tends to be the most high-toned, the most focused in minerality, and the highest in acidity. And these are pretty high-acid wines. I had a dinner some time back with a friend of mine who's a winemaker in California. It was in the winter, and we were tasting this wine, and she looked at me and she said, "This wine is almost too acid. The acidity is so crazy. It's almost like a flaw."
And you're like, "I love it."
Well, I said, "Yeah." So says the California Pinot Noir maker. I promptly got punched in the knee, but I probably deserved it. So a very historic estate, an estate I've been visiting now for many years, and it's one of the few places in Germany where once you've visited and you've tasted the wines, they give you the opportunity to buy wine. So I always bring back suitcase magnums. I love it. Von Schubert has consistently been one of the most overperforming wines for its category and price in my wine experience. This bottle is a 1983 Auslese. So Auslese is a richness level that suggests some sweetness, but actually in the Ruhr Valley the acid levels are so high, and they balance the sweetness so brilliantly that the wines don't tend to come off quite so sugary. I wouldn't describe this as a dessert wine at all. It's definitely a wine for savory food. It's lovely with foie gras, but even more interesting, I've enjoyed dinners where we've gotten to have this same 83, although a slightly different cuvee, a Fuller number 67, which is a separate barrel special bottling, with grouse, and it was incredible. Really gamey flavors work really well with this. Really intense sort of fat meats like goose are amazing with wines like this. Really, really complex, and has that perfect combination of a bit of fruitiness, a bit of minerality, a lot of savory tones, and just complexity that goes on forever. That acidity just maintains the flavors on the palate for so long that it's mind-boggling.
Is that what you feel you're really drawn to? Is that level of complexity?
Length and complexity, exactly. Those are the 2 standards of a wine that's really great. A lot of things that have great impact are impressive at the beginning, but if they fall short, then I lose interest quickly. I like wines that are long on the palate and that you end up thinking about for days.
For days.
Yeah. I'm thinking about this wine almost all the time.